What's up?
Not much.
Hi, George. What you making today? Making another bagel? Yeah, I'm looking at you, George. She's like, what?
Oh, she left.
Oh,
Where'd
wow.
she go?
I don't know. That was funny.
In my grandma's birthday card to my dad,
Yes.
she wrote, are you listening?
I'm listening.
She wrote, Governor Cuomo says the state has canceled all birthdays, etc., and you're still 49. Cool, huh? I hope this lasts through July, because her birthday's in July. I thought that was funny.
That's funny.
Good one, Grandma.
Wait, it's not the one that your brother sings, right? It's
Yeah.
Okay, because those
That's
your
the only
mom's.
one I have.
Yes. Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi.
What's up?
Just doing great.
Yeah.
To be
Yesterday, I
honest.
just let my brain die. I just didn't do anything after the test. I was like, now we're done.
I'm currently dead, so it's fine. It's fine.
Hi, Becca.
Good morning. How are we this morning?
What did you guys think of the test?
There was one question that really
Which one?
bad word me up.
The MLF one, because that one really screwed me up.
That one
Yeah,
really
that was
fucked me
pretty
up. Sorry.
Yep, I was like, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm doing.
Did we even talk about that in class?
For like 5 minutes because it's on. I don't have the lesion part in my notes, but I have some how it affects the eye muscles, but I didn't have how it exactly affects each eye muscle.
Yeah, I had one tiny little note about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was hard.
Yeah. Other than that, I thought it was pretty decent.
Connie?
Yeah, I think other than that, I was good.
Right,
That was
Jordan?
1 out of 5 questions.
I wish I laughed. That's something like that, though.
One about the visual deficits. When I was doing it, I was like, I don't understand what she's asking. Like, I did it 5 different ways, so I emailed her and was like, "What are you asking?" And then she finally answered back.
Me.
We just had to match, right? We didn't have to say the name of the deficit.
No, she said you could add it if you
Okay.
wanted to, but
Matched.
I already had it in there, so I figured let's just keep it. No, it didn't. You didn't have to. She said that'd be extra.
Good morning, Martha.
Wait. You could have gotten extra for that?
No,
Okay,
not like
'cause-
extra
'cause I
points,
knew
but like it would have
them.
been extra
Okay.
information.
'Cause
No,
I
don't
knew
freak out.
them, I just didn't put them.
Grace, why can I not see your beautiful face this morning?
She's not gonna unmute. She's very
I don't
sick.
think she's here.
Huh?
She's very sicky this morning. She was sick last night.
Uh-oh. You got the COVID
No
now.
corona. Just maybe food poisoning.
Ooh,
Say
yeah.
no throwing up, Jordan?
Huh?
You say no throwing up?
Good morning,
Oh, I
Jenna.
don't know if she's throwing up. I think she said she might have gotten food poisoning.
Oh.
Ain't it?
Not corona. I love that, Grace. That's a good enough explanation. I like it.
Christiana. Good morning.
Good morning.
What did I miss? There's my Sarah.
Good morning. Good morning. Miss you.
I miss you guys.
Guys, I have a confession to make.
Yes.
His girlfriend brought over this pink washable hair dye, so I tried it, but it did nothing.
Oof.
Nothing.
Sad.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I wanted to do my ends, and it's supposed to wash out in 5 washes anyways, so it was just
Kelly, how did your dog do on the test?
I don't know. He sat on my lap during
I know I saw your Snapchat and I cried.
it.
So cute. Hi, Molly.
Alina, what are you eating?
Where's Alina? I don't see her.
Nothing. Just no one's acknowledging Lil Dude.
Little dude,
Yes.
you're up in the corner. I couldn't see you.
Oh,
Little
okay.
dude
Will you pick him up?
is a lion.
Okay, okay.
Oh my God.
Well, I
He
was
doesn't
not.
like to be held in the morning.
Not in the
the
morning, just in the
morning.
afternoon.
At night, though, he's totally fine.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
We're okay. We're
Good.
hanging in there.
I heard something about a test. You guys had a test?
We had neuro yesterday,
Oh, neuro
and
test.
Connie really got us good.
Well, I'm sure it was fine. I'm sure it was all fine, right? It was all good. Totally fine. Well, I have another one of my favorite movies in my background. Anybody else like this one?
Oh, is it Wally?
It's Wally. I love Wally. I cry every time. Okay, so let's see. A couple of things before we get started. I am going to I am going to send out the splinting material, the easy form polymer splinting material this week to you guys. Could you all please send me your current address? Except for, I think, Sarah and who else did I send something to? Jean?
Grace.
Grace, that's right. So I have your guys' current address, but yes, if you guys could, yes, thank you, Grace. Grace is me.
Do you want us to email it to you or test it in the chat?
If you could email it to me, that way it's a little bit more private, so we're not, I'm not asking you to share your address with anybody else. Yeah, just send it to me in an email on your current address, and then so by the end of this week I can get the splinting material out to you. The reason I want to send it out early, like as soon as possible, is just to be super extra cautious because of what's going on out there. Nobody in my house has tested positive for COVID, and none of us have any symptoms. However, and I will be stuff that I sent out before I had, wiped down with antibacterial wipes and before I put in the envelope and things like that. But if you guys want to be super extra careful, you can leave, like when it reaches your home, you can leave it in the package for, up to a week before you open it if you are concerned about anything. So I just want to get it out to you early so you have that time to, if you just want to leave it there for a while before you open it, so you can do that. So I will be doing that by the end of the week. I think that's all that I have for you
I have a
guys.
question.
Yes.
So I know a couple of us were talking about the inclusivity assignment, and someone was saying that you have to find the bathroom and the facility and stuff. I know a lot of virtual tours don't have that. So if we can't find every aspect, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm expecting that you're not going to be able to find every aspect because you're doing it virtually. So like I said, just do the best you can with the information that you get from the website and from the virtual tour. Yeah. So yeah, I'm expecting that there are going to be like you said, like the bathroom or stairs or things like that. Or, where's the emergency exit? I don't know. Like you're not going to be able to find everything. So as you go through the assessment, you can say unable to find or something like that if you come across something like that. However, I would like you to try to make some assumptions of the things that you see on the virtual tour. Like if you go through the tour and you can see the doorways, or you can see the registration desk, or you can see the hallways, you know. And again, I know you can't make measurements, but I want you to make some assumptions of, yeah, it does look like it's wide enough, or there is enough space to get up to the registration desk, or yeah, the desk does have a lower counter for somebody that's a wheelchair user or something like that. Just
Okay, and then
Mhm.
if we're doing like museums, like aquariums or parks or something, like if it's already been done, we obviously can't do it again, right? If it's already been in the system.
You mean if it's already on the database?
Yeah.
I think it's fine if you know, at this point, if you do, you know, whatever you find, and you know, I won't be looking to see if it's already in the database. I mean, we won't be, unfortunately, we won't, you know, be able to, we can use the website information that you do on the assessment, but as far as like the physical assessment and stuff, that we won't be able to use that for the database. So even if it's already done, it's okay. It's more, you know, for your experience to go through doing one. Any other questions about the assignment or anything else coming up? Okay, so we're gonna talk about auditory needs today, auditory sensory aids. So let me just pull up the PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is on Moodle for everybody. There we go. So just like when we were talking about the sensory aids for individuals that have visual difficulties, you know, auditory sensory aids are designed to either amplify the auditory information in the environment or to replace the auditory information with another sense. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Before we talk about the sensory aids, we're just going to talk a little bit about different types of hearing loss. So there is 3 main different types of hearing loss that people can be diagnosed with. And this is typically through an audiologist. And so it's conductive hearing loss, sensory neural hearing loss, or mixed, which is both conductive and sensory neural hearing loss. And it really has to do with the part of the ear that's involved. Depending on the part of the ear that's involved, depends on the diagnosis that somebody gets. So conductive hearing loss is issues within the outer and or the middle ear. So you can see even in this here shows you sort of visually, right? The conductive is the outer ear, sort of this ear canal, or the middle ear that we call portion of the ear. So it's called conductive hearing loss because it occurs when sound is not conducted efficiently, right? So that sound doesn't move efficiently through the outer ear and the canal to the eardrum and through the bones of the middle ear. So it usually involves a reduction in the sound level or the ability to hear like sort of lower sounds or more faint sounds. Sometimes it could be corrected medically or surgically, like if it is ear canal malformation or chronic ear infections or allergies or perforated eardrum. Sometimes somebody has a foreign body presence in their ear, something along those lines. So it could be something that could be corrected if it's one of those issues.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Is this like the hearing loss that like typically comes with like age?
So not necessarily. That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest with you. I don't think so, but I will find out for you for age related.
Obviously like a lot of older people,
Yes.
hearing aids and stuff, and I just wondered if this was like the same mechanism or whatnot.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll find out the answer for you.
Thanks.
So the other type of hearing loss, or the second type, is sensory neural hearing loss. So this is when there's issues that lie within the cochlea, right? Or the inner ear, or to the damage to the nerve pathways from the inner ear to the brain. So this reduces the ability to hear or interpret the sounds, even when the speech is louder or amplified. It still may be unclear or sound muffled to the person. Okay, so conductive hearing loss is when there's an issue with the conduction or the movement of the sound through the outer ear and the ear canal. And sensory neural hearing loss is when it's the damage to the cochlea or the inner ear or the nerve pathways, right? So it makes it harder for the person to interpret the sounds. So sensory neural hearing loss is one of those that usually cannot be medically or surgically corrected. And this is the most common type of permanent hearing loss. So it could be due to illness, drug use, genetics, oh, there we go, aging, noise exposure, head trauma, or some malformation of the inner ear. So Christy, it looks like sensory neural hearing loss is what I was thinking it was going to be, is age-related hearing loss. And then mixed hearing loss is conductive and sensory neural hearing loss together. So if somebody has an issue with the outer ear and the conduction of the sound, and then they also have an issue either with the cochlea or the nerves that bring the sound to the brain. Any questions about conductive hearing loss or sensory neural hearing loss or mixed? Hopefully those make sense to you guys. Take a peek through. Okay. So just to talk about sound. So sound frequency, there's two characteristics of sound frequency that we consider and that are important to hearing. So pitch is one, and pitch is measured in hertz. So pitch is for normal hearing range, the frequencies are between 20 and 20,000 hertz. The most important daily sounds we hear are between 250 to 6,000 hertz, in that range. So speech includes a mix of low and high frequency sounds. So vowels have low frequency and are usually easier to hear for people, and consonants have a higher frequency and harder to hear. Unfortunately, consonants convey the most meaning of what we say. So if you talk to a speech and language pathologist and you talk to people that know more about speech and language, consonants tend to give more meaning to the words and make the words easier to understand when somebody is listening to what you're saying. So what is pitch, right? So pitch is has to do with the wavelengths of the sound waves. So the wavelengths, the number of each wave that will reach the ear in 1/100th of a second. So a short wavelength means a lot of waves or high frequency, and those are the vowels when we're talking about speech. And a long wavelength means fewer waves, lower frequency, and a lower sound or a lower pitch. And those are the consonants when we're talking about speech and language. Is anybody a singer in this class?
I sing.
Who said that?
Jeannie.
Who's that?
Jeannie?
Oh, Jeannie.
Me too. Sing.
Good. Yeah. So, I mean, when you are involved in singing, right, there's certainly a focus on pitch, right? Right, when you're working on singing, when you're working on your voice control. So this is sort of the physics behind that pitch that you're working on when you're working on when you're working on singing. Any questions about pitch, sound waves, high frequencies, low frequencies. So I think the important thing to remember that pitch has to do with the sound waves. Higher frequency is more waves, which is the vowels, and lower frequency or lower pitch, excuse me, is less waves, a longer wavelength, which is the low sound, which is the consonants, which is the hardest to hear, but gives us the most information when we're listening to somebody speak. So sound intensity is the loudness. Okay, so that's how loud something is, and this is measured in decibels. So hearing within normal range, can hear sounds ranging from 1 to 140 decibels. A whisper is about 25 to 30. Just to give you an idea, conversations, like normal conversations, about 45 to 60. Louder than 90 decibels can be a little uncomfortable. And then more than 120 decibels can be painful and can actually result in temporary or permanent hearing loss. So here's just a chart. I think it's interesting to think about the decibels or the loudness of different sounds. So here's, where we get up to where things get a little bit louder, about that 90 decibels. 105 is like rock concerts. So that's when you go to a concert and you leave and you hear that ringing in your ears, right? So it's because of how loud and how high the decibels were of that concert. So there is some response by your auditory system because of how loud that is. And then all the way up to about 140 decibels being like gunshots or fireworks. And around there is jackhammers. Remember using AirPods or headphones that are at peak volumes or up around 150 decibels, which again, that's in the area of, or the range of where it can cause some damage to your ears. Okay, so we're going to talk about hearing aids. So hearing aids is one of the auditory sensory aids that we use to help amplify, right, the auditory information that people are hearing in their environment. So the basic parts of a hearing aid that I want you to understand is that there is a microphone that's part of the hearing aid that picks up sound and carries it into the hearing aid. Within the hearing aid, there's an amplifier, right, that makes the sound louder and clearer. And then the receiver sends that stronger sound into the ear canal, right, and then to the cochlear implant or the cochlea and on into the brain. Okay, so this is an amplifying system. Most hearing aids are digital hearing aids nowadays. So digital hearing aids convert the sound waves into digital signals, and there's a computer chip within the hearing aid that analyzes the sounds and processes the sounds to amplify it and make it clearer, and then send it on, right? The receiver then sends it on into the ear canal. So the nice thing about the digital hearing aids, it provides flexibility in the hearing aid programming. So it can be matched to the needs for a specific pattern of hearing loss for people. Does anybody have any experience with hearing aids? So the important thing for you guys to understand about hearing aids, not that, as OTs that we don't, diagnose hearing loss. We don't, we don't refer or we don't, decide what type of hearing aid people are going to have and that sort of thing. That's audiology and typically speech therapy. We can refer people to audiologists if we are concerned about their hearing. But it is important that many people that you'll be working with, may have hearing loss. And lots of people, especially if you're working in the adult population, but even in pediatric population, you'll be working with people that have hearing aids. And just to have an understanding of how the hearing aid is working and what type of hearing aids are out there. So there are 6 sort of general types of hearing aids that we'll go over sort of quickly, just so you have an idea of the different types out there. So there's completely in the canal, or CIC hearing aid. These are the smallest hearing aids. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those commercials like the Miracle Ear hearing aid. I don't know if they do those commercials anymore, but this is very much like the Miracle Ear hearing aid. It is the smallest. It sits all the way into the ear canal, and it's very not visible, right? It's really hard for somebody else to see and even know that somebody is wearing that type of hearing aid. It has very small batteries. It has a very short life. It's difficult to handle. It does do some amplification of sound, but because it's so small, it doesn't have a lot of different. It doesn't have a lot of different things that it can do. It doesn't have a lot of added flexibility. It just sort of has an amplification ability to amplify what's in the environment.
Just a functional question with that. How would you get it out?
Right. I mean, getting it in and out, it's the most difficult hearing aid to handle. So this is certainly not a hearing aid for an elderly population, or for somebody that has, issues with fine motor control or coordination or anything like that. Even for me, handling hearing aids like this size for somebody is very difficult. You can see how small these are. And then inside this tiny little rectangle is a little tiny circle battery that goes in there. That has to be changed pretty often. So this is really for somebody who, has some hearing loss, just needs some amplification, that would like their hearing aid to not be as visible, and that really can handle such a small hearing aid. And it really just sort of sits in there. So you can kind of just grab because this little square sort of bumps out. I don't know if you can see on the side there how it bumps out a little bit. So you just grab that end and pull it out. But you have to have really good sensation. You have to have really good tactile discrimination. You have to have really good fine motor control to be able to really effectively use that type of hearing aid. So the next is the in the canal hearing aid. This is, or ITC. So in the canal is custom molded, right? And this one fits partly in the ear canal. So you can see this one is kind of hanging out a little bit. Same for mild to moderate hearing loss. It's less visible than larger sizes, but it is a little bit bigger than the completely in the canal hearing aid. So it includes some features that don't fit on the completely in the canal hearing aid, but still can be very difficult to adjust and to manage because of its small size. So this is an in the ear hearing aid. So you can see the difference here. This is sitting in the outer ear, where this in the canal is the hearing aid is right into the ear canal. This actually sits out in the outer ear. It's custom molded to fit that outer ear portion for people. This has some more features because it is bigger, right? And you can put more features in there that has volume control. It has directional microphones. It's easier to handle and easier to insert and take out. The batteries are a little bit bigger, but it is more visible in the ear. And there's lots of different reasons why people end up with the hearing aids that they do end up having. It's not necessary for our profession to know why people have the hearing aids to, a very specific extent, because we're not the ones that are prescribing hearing aids. The important thing is just to know what the different types of hearing aids are and what they do for people. So then there's the behind the ear hearing aid, BTE. So you've probably seen these types before. So the hearing aid, there's a tube that connects the hearing aid to a custom ear mold that fits in the ear canal. So this is traditionally the largest type, and it is capable for more amplification than the smaller size hearing aids. So usually when somebody ends up going to a behind the ear hearing aid is because these smaller hearing aids don't provide enough amplification to really help them hear better. A receiver in the canal hearing aid, the biggest difference about this is because there's a tiny wire. See, this is a wire instead of a tube that connects the pieces, and the receiver sits in the canal. These two are very similar. There's just different pieces that are a little bit different, like the wire versus the tube, and the ear mold sits in the canal further. And then the final one is an open fit hearing aid. This is again behind the ear. It's the largest hearing aid that has the largest portion that sits behind the ear. But this ear mold actually keeps the canal open to allow low frequency sounds to come in naturally, and then high frequency sounds to be amplified. Okay, so this would be somebody that has difficulty with high frequency sounds versus low frequency sounds. So this just opens the canal for those low frequency sounds to come in, and then this portion amplifies the high frequency sounds. Remember, if you go back to the pitch, low frequency being consonants, high frequency being vowels. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of the 6 different types. They are named mostly by, where on the ear that they sit. And they sort of go through, from the smallest with the least amount of features and the least amount of amplification to the highest and the largest hearing aids with the largest amount of amplification. So basically, the bigger the hearing aid typically is, the more features and the more amplification, meaning that person needs those features. There are also bone conduction hearing aids, and that's what these look like. This is used when the middle or outer ear cannot take a standard hearing aid due to malfunctions, chronic ear infections. For some reason, the person can't have that earpiece within the outer ear or the ear canal. So this sound processor, and it is removable. So this is the part that is surgically placed into the bone of the skull behind the ear. So it picks up sounds and converts it into vibrations and sends it through the skull bone directly into the inner ear. So it takes the sounds and converts it to vibrations and directs it to the inner ear. And then the final type of sort of amplifying sensory aid is cochlear implants. Does anybody have experience with or know anybody that has cochlear implant?
There was a kid at my school, I think he was my sister's age, like 2 years younger than me, and my mom used to work with him as a speech therapist, and he had a cochlear implant.
Yeah, it's really, they're really interesting. Typically, they are used with younger children. Those would be the typical people that would be recommended for cochlear implants before they are, when they're prelingual, I guess, like 12 months. They do say best if before age 5, because it is a very different way of hearing. It's not that it amplifies the sound in the environment. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So people it tends to be work best for individuals that are younger individuals that have not developed their language yet. So Jeannie, your cadaver had cochlear implants. That's really interesting.
Yeah, at the end, like they didn't say anything about her being deaf or like hard of hearing or anything, so we were kind of confused, but It's definitely what they were because I'd seen them in like my ASL classes and stuff, so I knew what they looked like.
Wow. So the person still had the cochlear implant, like,
Yeah. And
wow.
I think she was like 85 or something like that, so she was pretty old-ish.
Interesting. And yeah, so I mean, it can be used for adults who become deaf or severely hard of hearing postlingually. Did you have something you were going to say, Virginia?
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm sure Jeannie can agree. When we were in ASL, we watched a couple different videos of people with cochlears. And like we watched a video of an older couple that both got them, and that they were probably in their 60s or 70s. And you could see that there was such a difference with how they could interpret the sounds they were hearing. Like they really couldn't understand a lot of like words that were being said to them or smaller sounds. It was kind of just more like the ambiance, whereas like the little kids who got them, they could really fully like comprehend the words that they were hearing. So it was kind of interesting to see the difference.
Yeah, it's yes, right. So it's just a very different way of hearing, and so it's hard for people that have that heard language before, right, to learn how those sounds are being interpreted now versus kiddos that's how they are learning their language through that sound and through that cochlear implant. So we'll go a little bit more specific. So there is a external portion that sits behind the ear and a second portion that is surgically placed under the skin. And this is for sensory neural hearing loss, right? So this is for somebody that has issues with the cochlea. So it bypasses damaged portions of the ear and directly stimulates the auditory nerve. So the signals are generated by the implant are sent by way of the auditory nerve to the brain, which recognizes the signals as sounds. Okay, so there's that sort of external portion. Let me see. Sorry, I didn't make this bigger. This external portion here, right, which has the microphone and the speech processor and the transmitter, and then the receiver is on the other side of the skull, on the inside, and that takes it. You see this line here, this wire here takes it right to the cochlear implant into the auditory nerve. So the microphone picks up the sound. It's sent to the speech processor and analyzes the sound and converts it into an electrical signal, and the transmitter sends that signal to the implant where it's decoded and then determines how much should be sent on to the auditory nerve. And then the brain interprets the sound and the person hears, but the person doesn't necessarily hear the same as we hear.
I had a question really quick.
Mm-hmm.
So you already just answered it, but it doesn't sound the same way that we hear things. So like, how exactly does it? Yeah, how is it like different than how we hear?
I don't think that we could ever really know
Right.
how different it is unless we experienced it. But it is different because it's not just taking the sound that we are hearing in the environment and amplifying it, making louder, or bringing it, easier and conducting it better to the auditory nerve. It's actually, decoding those electrical signals, right? And bringing those to the auditory nerve, and then the brain is interpreting those signals. So people can hear sounds, but they don't necessarily hear them the same as we do.
Okay.
So that's why it's harder for adults to sort of acclimate and learn what the signals mean or the sounds mean versus kids who haven't learned language yet. That's the way that they're learning the language. So I am going to play this video here. I gotta get out of. And this will give you a little bit better explanation on how it works than probably what I told you. Did the video come up on your screen, or do I have to share it? Yeah, I think I have to stop sharing that. Okay, can you see the video now?
In case of sound waves striking the ear, they pass through the canal to the eardrum. From there, the sound waves are mechanically transmitted to the inner ear and amplified. In the inner ear, you can find the cochlea. The cochlea consists of 3 different canals. The middle canal is the organ of hearing and consists of sensitive hair cells. The hair cells can be stimulated electrically and forward the signal to the nerves and then onto the brain. In most cases of deafness, the hearing nerve still remains functional, but the hair cells have been damaged or even lost. In a cochlear implant system, sound enters a microphone and travels to an external mini-computer called a sound processor. The sound is processed and converted into digital information. This digital information is sent over a transmitter antenna to the surgically implanted part of the system. The implant will turn the sound information into electrical signals that travel down to an electrode array inserted into the tiny inner ear or cochlea. The electrodes directly stimulate the auditory nerve, sending sound information to the brain. Bypassing the damaged inner ear, the cochlear implant provides an entirely new mechanism for hearing.
Okay, so hopefully that explains a little bit better than I did how the cochlear implant works, and just how it's just a different way for people to interact with the sounds in their environment. So they are hearing things differently. Any questions about cochlear implants?
Question about like assistive technology in general.
Yeah.
Would you consider tubes that go into the eardrums a part of assistive technology, or only like the outside things?
I would consider it all to be assistive technology, since you have to have all of the parts functioning for it to, you know what I mean, to work for the person. Does that answer your question? For some reason, I can't see you guys. Let me try again.
I have one question.
Sure.
Are those waterproof? I'm just curious, like, do they have to remove them when they go showering?
Nope. Yeah. I mean, you can take the outer portion off. So the outer portion can be sort of removed. I don't know if the outer portion is waterproof or not, but if it's not, then they can remove it to take a shower, or if they're doing things where they don't want to use that outer portion. So and even when they're sleeping at night, if they want to take it off, so the outer portion can be removed, like easily removed.
I know someone with the bone conduction one.
Okay.
Outside, and it's the same case for that. Every time she goes swimming or something, she has to take it off, but the little part where it plugs in almost, that's like totally fine to be in the water and everything. So that's
yeah.
Usually with cochlear implants, like the outside part has to be removed, but I think they have like come up with certain like brands or whatever that are trying to be more water resistant and waterproof. But
yeah, I mean, it would make sense, I think, to have it to be water resistant or waterproof. Like if you want to go swimming, I would still want to be able to hear, what was going on. I wouldn't want to have to remove that. So yeah, I would imagine that they're at least working on it, or there are more products out there, hopefully, that would be waterproof. And I don't know why when I'm sharing the PowerPoint with you guys now and I can't see your screen, your thumbnails. So, okay, so the other video on here, we won't play it today, but this is of a young girl who's for the first time trying out her cochlear implant. It's just very interesting to see. And so we do have to talk about, when we were talking about cochlear implant, and I don't know if Virginia and Jeannie in your ASL classes, if they talk about sort of the controversy around cochlear implants. So, you know, many deaf individuals don't feel, you know, that cochlear implants are beneficial. They think, especially when parents decide to do a cochlear implant for a child, that they're not giving that child the ability to provide consent and whether they want to have a cochlear implant or not. Many people in deaf culture don't consider themselves as disabled, and that being deaf is an issue because they have ASL and they have their own ability to communicate. So it's, you know, their perception is that the implant is, you know, society's way of trying to fix them instead of trying to understand them. I don't know. Oops, sorry. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
There's like a little black bar at the top of it, but we can see it fine.
Oh, okay. So Virginia and Jeannie, did they talk at all about any controversy around the cochlear implants in your ASL courses?
Yeah, we talked a bit about it, like the whole like big D versus little D deaf culture, and how sometimes, especially when you like a parent decides for a child, or even when an adult decides, they're kind of like rejecting the deaf community if they get a cochlear implant.
Yes. Yes. And so sometimes people can almost, you know, sort of be rejected by the, you know, some deaf community members because they have a cochlear implant. So it's just sort of, you know, an interesting perspective from individuals from the deaf community. So that's a cochlear implant. So another way that that has been, you know, created to sort of amplify or make it easier for people to hear is called a T-coil. So a T-coil is a small coil of wire inside a hearing aid that's designed to pick up an electromagnetic signal from a loop system. And that loop system could either be something like a loop that the person wears around their neck, or if they are in an environment that has a loop system in that environment. So for example, and we'll talk, there's a video on here, but next time you go to Wegmans, most Wegmans have T-coil areas set up around, they usually have at least 1 or 2 cash registers that have a T-coil system, and you should see a sign that looks like this. So if there is a T-coil system there, that means there's this loop system, this wire sort of around the cash register that the person's hearing aid can connect to. And it helps to decrease the background noise in a busy environment and amplifies the noise that's inside that wire loop system. So the person has to turn it on their hearing aid. So if, like, say they're at Wegmans, they have them around the pharmacies too. So you can look at next time if you're passing by the pharmacy. If they see that the person, or that there's a loop system there and they have this in as part of their hearing aid, they have to turn it on, turn the T-coil on. And so then it converts the signal into sound and plays the sound that's in that loop system directly into the hearing aid, and then sort of shuts out the unwanted background noise that's not within that loop system. So again, it could be a loop system. Somebody could wear that loop just around their neck, right? So and then it will take the auditory information that's happening around that loop system that's around their neck and send it right to the hearing aid. Or it could be a large loop system like at Wegmans where they have a loop wire around the area of the pharmacy or the cash register. It takes that, and then it takes that auditory information within that loop system and sends it right to the hearing aid. And you can have even very large induction loop systems, like a whole room, like for a meeting or something. You can see this here, would be the whole loop. So this is the video if you're interested to watch. This was on the news several years ago when they first installed the telecoil at Wegmans. Some other ways to amplify, there's personal amplifiers or FM or digital systems. So these can be used with hearing aids or as an alternative. So it's used with headphones, which helps to sort of eliminate background noise. And then the person that is speaking uses a microphone that directly goes to the headphones. So the person that is listening, hears their voice in an amplified fashion. So it's good for one-on-one conversations. My niece has hearing loss in one of her ears. So when she was young, when she was in elementary school, she used a digital system like this where she wore the headphones and the teacher wore a microphone when she was in the class, so she could hear the teacher better. I've used a system like this in the hospital before too, when individuals have had hearing loss, and with individuals that had hearing aids or that didn't have hearing aids, and again, just to be able to, so they could hear whoever's talking to them clearer, and really understand what the healthcare person is telling them.
So when I was in 5th grade, I had something very similar to this, but it was like the thing that sat on my desk because I had tubes in my ears and I had 4 sets, so they created holes in my eardrums. So I had hearing loss, obviously, because of that. So there's another girl who had hearing aids who would sit next to me and we would kind of share it. And like we would sit in the front, but like it was like this big clunky thing. So like I think the earphones would have been more interesting than just carrying around this huge thing.
Yeah, was it just like a sort of like a speaker amplifier that just made it louder? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think headphones, are a little bit easier because, again, it's not this big clunky thing that you're carrying around, and it sort of minimizes the background noise and puts the auditory information directly into your ears. So I wanted to talk a little bit about signaling systems. So these are systems for people, specifically tends to be in their home. If you think about all the auditory sort of notifications or auditory sounds that happen around us that alert us to things, like your phone notifications, your alarm clock, your doorbell, your smoke alarms and your fire alarms. So somebody that has hearing loss or has hearing impairment, many people really need an alternate method for those alert sounds, those environmental sort of signaling sounds. So it can be typically it's either a much louder audible sound, or it could be flashing lights, a bright flashing light, or a vibration, which even just within your phone and your phone notifications, you can change your notifications to any one of those 3 alert system, ways to alert you. So you can have your light on your phone flash, or your phone can vibrate, or you can turn up the alert or the notification. So each transmitter within somebody's home is typically designed to alert the person to a specific event. So let's say there's somebody at home who has a baby. They will have different transmitters and different ways to alert them of if the baby's crying through the baby monitor, if the doorbell is ringing, or if the smoke alarm goes off, right? So, they need different alerts for those different events that are happening. So for example, if somebody likes the flashing light signal system, they could use that one signal system with different transmitters in different rooms, but with different ways of alerting. So, 3 slow flashes of the, of the lamp could be the doorbell is ringing, depending on what room they're in the house. So each room that they're in where they want that alert to happen needs a transmitter. But they can have 3 slow flashes, meaning the doorbell's ringing, 3 quick flashes means the telephone's ringing, or regular on and off flashes is signaling that the baby is crying. That's just an example. Or somebody could have, lighting, flashing of a light to alert you of one thing, and then they can have, a vibration sound coming from the baby monitor that they're carrying around to alert them from the baby crying. Can be very much individualized. So, this is just a quick overview, basically what happens. So the doorbell, so for instance, from the doorbell, on the outside, if you ring somebody's doorbell, looks just like any other doorbell. But the transmitter, I'm sorry, I said the transmitters need to be in each room, is the receivers. So there's one transmitter, and then the receivers, there has to be one receiver in each room that the person wants to have the alert happen. So the doorbell rings, it goes into the built-in transmitter, and it sends a signal to the receivers that are throughout the home. This is just an example of for a baby monitor. So now all baby monitors have vibration and light on the baby monitor. So these red lights can shine when the baby is crying. But if the person would like more of an alerting system, there are some monitors that you can use with a watch that the person wears on their wrist, and the watch will vibrate when the baby is crying. Smoke alarm transmitters. Yeah, so this is what I was saying before, that a receiver needs to be in each room where the person wants to be alerted. So here's just an example talking about the different receiver types, right? A strobe receiver, a loud audible receiver, an alarm clock receiver. You can have an alarm clock receiver that includes where you place something under the mattress of your bed and it shakes the bed. Or you can have a flashing lamp. I would need the bed shaker. There's no possible way that I would wake up just because my lamp is flashing next to me. So I like this visual here. This is just a really good, sort of gives you a visual of how the different receivers work. So let's say, because you really need to have these alerts in more than one room of the house, because we all spend, different amounts of times in different rooms in the house. So let's say the person is at the door, they're ringing the doorbell. So you can have a strobe receiver in the living room if you're sitting there watching TV when it happens. You can have a loud audible receiver in your office if you happen to be in your office at the time. Or you can have an alarm clock receiver, right, that is connected to the doorbell that will shake the bed if you're sleeping at night and somebody rings the doorbell. Okay. Oops.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So if somebody rings the doorbell, it sends all the signal to all 3 no matter what. So like even if there's nobody in the bed, it's still gonna like activate the bed shaker, or like
yes.
if you're okay.
Yeah. Yep. So it just sends the signal to all the receivers, because I mean, who knows where you're going to be when somebody comes to the door and rings the doorbell. Yep. Any other questions about the alerting systems? Okay. Oops. Don't want to do that. Don't want to end the meeting yet. Okay, so I'll pull that back up. Oh, I think. Sorry. Hold on one second, guys. For some reason now when I share the PowerPoint, I can't see your thumbnails, but let me see if there we go. There you are. Okay, that makes me feel better. Okay, so next I'm just going to go sort of quickly through the telephone, different types of telephone use. These are becoming less and less used because of the accessibility of cell phones now. And, you know, like we talked before, like the use of FaceTime and Skype and those types of options. But there are still some people that use this type of communication devices out there. So teletype is probably the oldest system that people use. And you can see down here where, you know, this keyboard is connected to the phone and the person is typing in what they want to say. And then there's specially trained relay agents that are sort of the middle person who, you know, takes that typed information and then they either, depending on who the other person is that they're talking to, if the other person is a hearing person, that relay person will verbally say what was typed, or if it is another person that's hard of hearing that has a TTY, and they can relay that message in a typed way. So again, it's just, you know, not used very often, but there are still some people out there that use it. There is a voice carryover. So this combines voice and text. So voice carryover allows people who cannot hear well, but still want to use their own voice. Like they can still speak and want to speak into the phone and speak directly to the other person on the telephone. And then they can read the other person's response on a text display. So again, this still involves typically a relay person. But it's called voice carryover because the person using it wants to be able to speak to the person on the other side instead of typing. And then hearing carryover. This is a type of call that allows a person who can hear but not speak, listen directly to the conversation and then respond by typing. So this is called hearing carryover, right? Because they can hear what the other person is saying, but then they need to use TTY or some other method because they cannot speak to the phone through the phone. And there's different ways of using it. You can use hearing carryover to hearing carryover or hearing carryover to TTY. And then there's video relay services. These are probably the most used relay services, but then again, these are getting replaced again by FaceTime and Skype. However, video relay services are very useful for somebody who wants to have sort of a telephone conversation with somebody that uses ASL, but the person that wants to talk to the hearing impaired person doesn't know ASL. So it's almost like a telephone interpreter service. So for the hearing person, right, the VRS center would call the deaf person and relay the information back and forth. So the deaf person can, you know, use ASL and the relay person can interpret back to the hearing person what the deaf person was saying. So again, just really quickly, just some, you know, different types of ways for people to communicate over the phone that have hearing impairments. TTY is typing and texting. Voice carryover is when that person can speak and they want to use their voice, but they can't hear well. So they need some way for like whatever the other person is saying to be texted or typed back to them. Hearing carryover is when the person wants to hear the conversation, but they need help speaking to the other person. And then video relay service is really helpful when there needs to be an individual, like an interpreter individual in between when somebody is using ASL. Any questions about the phone stuff? Okay. So closed captioning. Anybody use closed captioning when they're watching TV? We use closed captioning. It's not that we can't hear that well, but we like to put it on in case it's like, what did that person say? Or, so we use closed captioning very often. There are rules from the FCC about closed captioning. And there are differences between something that's pre-recorded, something that's live, the FCC says that closed captioning has to be accurate. It has to be as synchronous as possible. So if you use closed captioning, it should be, if it's pre-recorded, it should be that the closed caption that's coming up on the screen should match what is being said on the screen. If it is live, they can't really make it synchronous, but it has to be as close as possible or as quick as possible. So if you've ever watched something live and had closed captioning on, it's actually sort of funny to watch the person that's typing it, and they're sort of backspacing and fixing their mistakes. And sometimes the words are like, I'm not sure that that's the word the person said, but they're trying to be as accurate as they can. So that's closed captioning. So I just wanted to finish up talking a little bit about language interpretation. So healthcare providers must communicate in the most effective way that they possibly can with individuals, and this could be individuals that have hearing issues, or this could be individuals that have issues speaking, and this could be individuals that have that speak a different language, where English is not their first language. So that encompasses all sort of language interpretation needs for people. So we must, from the ADA, says we must provide appropriate auxiliary aids and services when necessary for effective communication. So we must do the best that we can to make sure that we are communicating with people in the most effective way. So if you are working at a place that has interpreters available, that's fantastic. Like working at the hospital, working at Strong, we have there's Spanish interpreters available 24 hours a day, and there are ASL interpreters available 24 hours a day. There's also a blue phone system. And I can't remember what the company is called that does the language interpretation, but the blue phone is has two headsets, and you call the interpreter site, and you ask for the language that you need to have interpreted, and the person that you're working with has one headset on the phone, and you have the other headset, and you're speaking to the interpreter through the phone, and they're interpreting what you're saying to the person that you're working with. And I have used live interpreters, I've used phone interpreters, I've used interpreter information on my phone. I've used Google Translate before when trying to work with people that have different languages. And again, just trying to use what you have to the best of your ability to communicate with people effectively. So I'll just give you an example. As an OT, some of the things that we do, like in a hospital environment and when we're working with people, isn't necessarily something that you can maybe bring an interpreter, a live interpreter, in the room with you. So for instance, I had somebody that I was working with toileting, and the person was not comfortable with the interpreter coming into the bathroom. While this person is toileting in the bathroom. So it was fine. So, we sort of had the interpreter on the other side of the door. And I kept so, what was that? What was he saying? What what was he, how is that happening? You know, sort of back and forth. I've had instances where I've, you know, used the blue phone where I've talked to people and, you know, sort of prepped them for our session and, you know, what we were going to be doing. And then, you know, we had to sort of hang up the phone. And that's, you know, when this was a Russian gentleman, when I used Google Translate to sort of get us through the rest of the session, because we really couldn't just sort of sit there on the phone and complete the rest of the session. So again, the whole point is to use the resources that you have to make sure that the person that you're speaking to understands what it is that you're telling them. Very often people, when they don't understand what you're saying, or they're not interpreting what you're saying very well, very often people will maybe ask once for you, or say once that they didn't understand what you said, but they won't ask again. And then they'll just say, yep, okay, even though they don't understand what you're saying. So you can even think about yourself, like if you have ever been talking to somebody and you couldn't hear what they were saying, or maybe you really didn't understand what they were saying, and you might ask them once, you maybe even ask them twice, but you probably aren't going to ask them again. You're just going to be like, okay, sounds good, right? Because you just don't feel, you know, you just sort of feel like sort of a burden, like, can you say that again? I really didn't get, can you, you know, how many times you're going to ask somebody to do it? Well, that's typically what some of your clients will probably do too. So it is important to just not assume that the person understands what you're saying, but to take measures to make sure that they understand what they're saying. Like, you know, can you tell me what it is that I was just telling you about? You know, what did you understand from what I said? Do you have any questions? Versus just saying, did you understand what I said? And they say, yep. And then you go, okay. And in reality, they didn't understand what you said. So some of the important thing is you must ask the person how they would like to communicate with you. So if you come across somebody who is hearing impaired, however, when you approach them and you're talking to them, it seems that they understand, maybe they can read your lips and they're answering your questions, you still must ask them how they like to communicate, and you must offer, if you have it, an interpreter. So like in the hospital, we have to say, you know, would you like an interpreter to be involved? And I have had some people say, yes, absolutely, and which surprised me because I thought they were understanding what I was saying. And I've had people say, no, I'm fine, which surprised me because I thought maybe they didn't hear what I was saying. So you have to ask. And that can be an ASL interpreter or a language interpreter. The other important thing to understand about interpreters is they have to interpret everything that is said in front of them. Right, so once they enter the room and once they introduce themselves as the interpreter, they will say that I will be interpreting everything that is said in front of me. So you must speak to the person, the client, like you're speaking to them. You should look at them. The language that you use should be using their pronouns, right, and using their information. It should not be where you are speaking to the interpreter and the interpreter is speaking to the client. You should just speak to the client, and then you stop and you wait for the interpreter to interpret what you're saying, and then listen to the client, and then the interpreter tells you what they're saying. You must do your very best not to use a family member as an interpreter. And so why do you think you should do your best to not use a family member as an interpreter? Any ideas? Because it happens. Oh, go ahead.
Sometimes the family might think that, like, based off of all their previous experiences with you, that they want something or that you want something, but it's really not what you want, and they might just assume things rather than giving like the full story.
Yes, right. So a family member is not an objective interpreter, right? They have their own biases. They haven't been trained to interpret. They're not going to interpret everything that the person says, right? They're going to sort of paraphrase. They're going to add their own ideas, most likely. Even if they're trying to do the best that they can, they're going to add their own spin on the interpretation. So using a family member as an interpreter should be your very last resort. Even if the client consents to it or would rather use the family member, if you have another interpreter way of interpreting available to you, you must use that option. And unfortunately, not all family members are out for the best interest of the client. We would hope that they would be, but we can't know that. And yes, often I have come across family members that are not out for the best interest for the client. So we really must do the best that we can to not use family members to interpret.
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
Have you found that like the flow of the conversation is different when you use an interpreter?
Oh, yes. Yep. And so it takes practice to use an interpreter. And again, the biggest things that I can tell you is, to take your time to speak directly to the person that you are talking to, directly to the client. Understand that the interpreter is going to interpret everything that you say, and then they're going to interpret everything that the client says. Like they try to really word for word interpret everything that is said. So again, it takes practice. Try to be super clear in what you're saying to the client before you say it. And you just sort of have to be patient, and it just takes some practice getting used to using an interpreter. The phone interpreter is probably it's the hardest one to use because there's a lot of missing body language that the interpreter doesn't get on the phone versus a live interpreter, and they get sort of a lot of different body language that can help them understand sort of what the client is trying to tell you. But again, we have to sort of try to do the best that we can. Any written materials, things like that need to be in that person's preferred language, like a home program, home exercise program, any educational materials. We must do the best that we can to give them that person that information in their primary or preferred language. Okay, so the final sort of slide that I have here, this is a YouTube video. There's some that just shows you some common signs for ASL that have to do with ADLs. So that's for your viewing pleasure if you would like to take a look at that, for those of you that maybe don't have a lot of experience with ASL. And you can take a look at some basic signs that I've certainly used some of these signs myself with clients that have hearing loss. And clients do appreciate when you try your best to use interpreters, and they also do appreciate if you try your best to learn some, like if somebody uses ASL, if you try to learn some sign language too, to have a little bit more one-on-one conversation with them. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here so I can see all of you. Hello. All right, so any questions about the auditory sensory aids? Any questions about the different types of hearing loss, the different types of hearing aids, other systems, closed captioning, interpreters? Okay. All right, so Tuesday lab, I'll see you in a few minutes. And Thursday, guys, I'll see you on Thursday. You can't see my hand. Bye. Have a good one.